You know, sometimes, a joke isn't just a joke. Sometimes, it's a seed planted in ground that's already a little bit rocky, and you don't realize what kind of tree it's going to grow into until years later, when its branches are casting a long, cold shadow over everything. This is a story about one of those jokes. And the kid who heard it. My older brother, Michael, he was everything my father, Arthur, ever wanted in a son. Loud, athletic, always competitive. From the time Michael could swing a bat, he was playing baseball, and by the time he was 16, he was the best pitcher on his high school team. My dad? Arthur never, not once, missed a game. Not a regular season weeknight game, not a 2-hour drive to some field a few towns over in the pouring rain, not a practice tournament on a Saturday morning when any reasonable adult would have stayed in bed. He was there every single time, without fail, without a single complaint. Me? I played soccer. Different sport. Quieter vibe. Apparently, a completely different tier of importance. The year I turned 14, and Michael was 16, I actually kept a tally. I know, it sounds a little petty, but I was 14 and trying to understand something that just didn't quite add up. That whole season, my dad made it to exactly one of my games. One. And that one only happened because it was at our school, and he was already in the parking lot, waiting to pick Michael up from baseball practice. He didn't even bother to come stand by the field. He watched from the car, and then, about 20 minutes before the final whistle, he just drove away. I didn't say anything. That wasn't my style. I just noticed it. Filed it away. And I kept going. That was kind of my whole thing back then, just keep going, don't make a fuss about it. That summer, Michael's team made it to regionals. Big deal. It was a full tournament format, multiple games, the kind of thing that takes over an entire weekend. Arthur carved out both days like it was some kind of religious obligation. My mom, Eleanor, said we were going as a family. During the 7th inning of one of the games, I realized I'd left my phone in Arthur's truck. I slipped out of the bleachers, made my way back to the parking lot. Nothing special on my mind, just going to grab my phone. That's when I heard Arthur's voice. It was carrying pretty clearly from the far side of the truck. He was talking to another father, some guy he didn't even know, just a dad from a different team. The man was venting about his own son. Said the kid had no drive, no focus, no competitive instinct. Just went through the motions. Arthur was doing that sympathetic chuckle, you know the one, the kind people do right before they're about to top your problem with their own story. He suggested the guy should just trade his son for Arthur's. Then he paused, for effect. That practiced pause of someone who's delivered this bit before. And he said, not Michael, obviously. Just like that. Ranking items on a shelf. Not Michael. My younger one. He's so forgettable, you'd probably never even notice the swap. The other dad thought that was pretty good. Arthur kept going. He said sometimes he'd watch Michael out there and think about what it would have been like to have 2 kids like him instead of just one. Said that would have been the dream. They were both laughing by the end. Real laughs, the kind that mean the joke actually landed. I was standing 3 feet away, on the other side of the truck, my phone already in my hand. I didn't move. I didn't say a word. I just waited until they walked back toward the field. Then I got into the back seat of the truck, sat there in the quiet, and stared at the dashboard for a long time. Just processing. Turning it over and over in my head. Arthur came back after the final out, Michael already in the front seat, breaking down his performance pitch by pitch. Arthur was grinning, riding the high of a win. He glanced back at me and asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. He didn't look again. That was the last honest conversation we ever had. See, that parking lot moment wasn't just a bad joke. It was a 14-year-old kid hearing the one person who was supposed to be in his corner use him as a punchline to impress a stranger. And the worst part isn't even the words themselves. It's the laugh. You can recover from harsh words said in anger. But when your own father laughs about you like you're a bit he's been workshopping, that sound doesn't leave you. I want to be clear about what I did next and what I didn't do. I didn't blow up. Didn't slam doors or go cold in some dramatic way that would have forced a confrontation. I didn't write him a letter or leave hints or create some obvious situation where he'd have to ask what was wrong. I didn't give anyone anything to work with. I just stopped. Stopped asking him to come to my games. Stopped lingering after dinner hoping he'd talk to me. Stopped finding small ways to get his attention when Michael wasn't in the room. All those little habits, the ones I'd been doing without even realizing I was doing them, they just quietly ended. I gave him exactly the presents he'd told that stranger I was worth. For the first few months, he didn't even notice. He was too deep in Michael's world. Games, early buzz from college scouts, the whole machine of raising a kid everyone could see was going somewhere. I was background noise. And for a while, that just confirmed everything I'd already decided. But then, something shifted. Around the 4 or 5 month mark, Arthur started knocking on my door at night. Casual stuff at first. Did I want to shoot hoops in the driveway? Did I want to ride with him to pick up food? I said I had homework. Said I wasn't hungry. Said maybe next time. He kept coming back. The knocks became a regular thing. He started showing up at my soccer games, too. Not every game, but definitely more than before, which wasn't hard given the baseline. He'd stand on the sideline, quiet, not making a scene about it. Wave if I looked over. After games, he'd try to make conversation. How'd you feel out there? Good game. That kind of thing. I thanked him the same way I'd thank a neighbor who showed up to help move furniture. Polite. Distant. Nothing real getting through. He was working for something I had already decided wasn't available. Michael picked up on it before Arthur did. One evening, he pulled me aside and asked what was going on with me and Dad. I said nothing was going on. He said it felt like I was treating Arthur like a stranger. I said I was just giving Dad what he clearly wanted. One less son to think about. Michael didn't understand that line, but he didn't push it either. I turned 16. Then 17. Arthur started slipping notes under my door, asking if I wanted to catch a game with him, grab lunch, just hang out somewhere. I answered every single one. Maybe next time. Always polite. There was never a next time. Michael told me once that he'd seen Arthur sitting alone in his car in the driveway for almost an hour after dinner one night. Not leaving, not going back inside. Just sitting there in the dark. Not moving. I heard that, and I put it in the same place I put everything else. The thing about sustained, deliberate quiet is that it doesn't look like anything from the outside. It just looks like a kid who got older and more private. That's what Eleanor kept telling herself, I think. She knew something was off. She'd catch me walking away mid-conversation with Arthur and give me this look like she was trying to work out whether there was a real problem or I was just being a teenager. I never gave her anything concrete to go on. Arthur never stopped trying. I'll say that for him. Most people who hit that kind of wall for long enough will eventually stop knocking. He didn't. He just adjusted. Got quieter about it, less obviously persistent, more subtle. Found reasons to be in the same room. Asked questions he knew I'd answer in 2 words. Waited in the kitchen sometimes when I came down for water late at night. I was civil every single time. That was the key. I was never mean about it. Never snapped. Never made a scene. Never gave him an obvious reason to feel wronged. I kept just enough warmth in the room to keep things from exploding while making sure nothing real ever happened between us. My strategy was boring, actually. And that was the point. Junior year, he started coming to more of my games. Senior year, he came to almost all of them. He never made it a thing. Never walked up afterward with the energy of someone expecting credit for showing up. He just came. Stood there. Watched. And I let him. And every time I looked over and saw him on the sideline, I felt nothing. Not anger. The anger had burned out around year 2. Just a flat, quiet emptiness. Like the space where a connection should have existed, had stopped expecting anything a long time ago. Eleanor tried a few more times to get to the bottom of it. Nothing aggressive, just pointed. She mentioned once that she'd noticed the change in me around age 14. Said it was like someone had flipped a switch and she'd been waiting for it to flip back. I told her everything was fine. She'd look at me like she was deciding whether to let it go or push harder, and then she'd let it go. Senior year ended. I got into a university out in Colorado on a partial merit scholarship. Arthur's face did something when he heard, a mix of pride and relief and something complicated underneath. He put his hand out. I shook it. He said he was proud of me. I said, "Thank you." I remember standing at the dinner table when he said it, watching him try to make the moment into something bigger, something warmer. He kept looking at me like he was waiting for me to meet him halfway. I didn't. I thanked him and excused myself, and I heard him sit back down behind me with this quiet, deflated exhale that I chose not to turn around for. That was the thing about year 4. He'd gotten better at showing up, and I'd gotten better at making sure it didn't matter. And that was that for 3 more years. A week before I left for college, the house developed a specific kind of tension I hadn't felt before. Like the air pressure had changed and everyone was waiting for something to either release or break. Eleanor announced she was throwing a going-away party. Full production, catering, decorations, the whole extended family coming in, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't seen in years. She had that particular energy she gets when she's decided something and is daring anyone to argue. I told her it wasn't necessary. She said it was happening. I said fine and went back to packing. My room was already half in boxes, clothes, books, a few things that actually meant something. There were no family photos on the walls. I'd taken those down sometime sophomore year, so gradually I hadn't even noticed it happen until I was packing and the walls were just bare rectangles. I stood there for a minute, looking at the blank spaces where the frames used to be, thought about putting them back, and decided against it. Michael came in without knocking, his thing, and sat on my bed, looking like he'd been carrying something heavy and was about to put it down whether I wanted it there or not. He said Arthur wasn't in a good place, wasn't sleeping. Eleanor was worried. He'd been crying at night. Michael said he thought I needed to know. I told him I was sorry to hear that. He said he knew I wasn't. That was the whole problem. He asked me once more what had happened. Said I'd been treating Arthur like a stranger for 4 years and it was affecting the whole house. That whatever happened, I should at least say it out loud to someone. I asked him what he thought would change if I explained it. He didn't have an answer. He told me the party was Saturday. The whole family was coming and Eleanor needed me to show up and act like a human being for a few hours. I told him I'd be there. 2 nights before the party, I came downstairs late for water and found Arthur sitting at the kitchen table. He hadn't heard me coming, and for a second, I considered turning back, but he looked up, and now we both knew. He asked if I could sit for a minute. I poured my water, leaned against the counter. Didn't sit. Didn't want to make it seem like a long conversation. He said he knew things had been hard between us. I said I didn't know what he meant. He said he'd been right there the whole time. He rubbed his hands together, nervous, trying to find a start, and said he could see I was somewhere else, that I had been for years. And he didn't understand why. I told him I was just getting older. He said that wasn't it. He said I looked at him like he was nothing. I told him I didn't look at him like he was nothing. I looked at him like what he was, a man who lived in the same house. His face collapsed. He asked me what he'd done. Said he'd been trying to figure it out for 4 years and was losing his mind over it. I told him good night and went back upstairs. In 6 days, I'd be a long drive away. I could start fresh somewhere new, with 0 witnesses to any of this. That was still the plan. It had always been the plan. Saturday arrived. By 5 in the afternoon, the house was loud in the way it only gets when extended family descends. Multiple conversations going at once. Someone always calling someone else's name from another room. The particular chaos of people who only see each other a few times a year, acting like they're completely current. I put on the blue shirt Eleanor had set out for me. Combed my hair. Looked at myself in the mirror for a beat. Practiced smile. Empty eyes. Ready. When I came downstairs, the reactions were immediate. Look at you, college-bound. So exciting. Your dad must be over the moon. I gave everyone the same nod, the same thank you, the same controlled warmth that let me move through a room without actually letting anyone in. Arthur was in the center of everything, the way he always was at family gatherings, holding court, making people laugh, being the loudest thing in the room. When he saw me on the stairs, the performance dropped for a half-second. Underneath it was pure, unguarded hope. Like tonight might finally be different. I walked over, said hi to my grandfather, answered a few questions. When Arthur put his hand on my shoulder, I didn't pull away. Didn't react at all. Just stood there with nothing on my face while he told my grandfather how proud he was of both his boys. He looked at me while he said it. I looked at my grandfather. Later in the evening, Arthur stood up to give a toast. He did this at every family gathering. Always had something to say. Always found a way to anchor the room to himself. This time was different, though. His voice was unsteady from the start. He talked about being grateful for the people around him, about how fast time moved, about what it meant to watch your kids step into their lives. Then he looked directly at me. He said he knew he hadn't always been the father he should have been. He said he wanted everyone there to know that he was proud of both his sons. His voice broke on the last word. The room had gone quiet. 30 people looking at me. I gave him a polite smile. Then I said, "Thank you, sir. Thank you all for coming." The silence after that was its own thing. It had weight and temperature. My grandfather frowned. Eleanor's face went pale. Michael's expression just dropped. Arthur stood there with his glass still raised and nowhere to go with it. I turned and greeted a cousin who had just come in from the back. That's what you do when someone you barely know says something nice to you. You acknowledge it and move on. One of the aunts filled the silence, said something about me always being so polite. Arthur didn't answer her. He set his glass down and walked toward the kitchen. Michael appeared at my side and kept his voice low. He said calling him sir in front of 30 people wasn't respect. I said I thought it was. He said it was humiliation. I told him he started this. He opened his mouth, and one of the grandmothers walked over before anything else could happen. The party ran 2 more hours. Arthur avoided me for all of it. Eleanor smiled through the whole thing, holding it together the way she always did, but every few minutes I'd catch her watching me with an expression that had stopped being confused and started being something colder, more decided. When the last guest left and the door closed, she stood with her back against it. 2 words, living room. It wasn't a request. The 4 of us sat in the living room in the same formation that had defined the last 4 years. Me on the couch, Michael beside me, Eleanor across from us, Arthur near the window with his back half turned. Eleanor drove the whole thing forward, because that was always her role. She asked what that was. I said it was a respectful way to address someone older. She said it was how you talk to a stranger. Arthur turned around. His eyes were already red. He told her to leave it. She said no. Said she'd watched the family fall apart for 4 years and was done pretending it wasn't happening. She asked me one last time what had happened between me and my father. I said nothing happened. That nothing happening was exactly the problem. No real presence, no effort, no engagement, just Michael. Always Michael. Arthur said that wasn't true, that he loved both his sons. I asked him how many of my soccer games he'd come to when I was 14. He said he'd been to plenty. I said 0. He hesitated. I told him he hadn't missed a single one of Michael's games that whole year. Weeknights, weekends, rain, drive hours. There was always time for Michael. He started to say he'd been working a lot back then. I told him that argument didn't hold when he was physically at every single one of Michael's games that same year. Eleanor asked if this was really just about games. I said it wasn't only games. She asked me to tell her what else. I said it didn't matter. I was leaving in 5 days. After that, nobody had to think about me anymore. She told me to sit back down. Something in her voice made me do it. Michael said quietly that I'd once told him something had happened at his baseball regionals. Just said it like a fact. No agenda. Arthur's face shifted. I watched it happen. A flicker of recognition that he immediately tried to bury. Said he didn't know what Michael was talking about. Eleanor pressed him. He kept deflecting. His voice was getting tighter. I stood up. I told him, of course you don't remember. Just 2 dads joking around, right? He went completely white. I walked upstairs. 20 minutes later, the shouting started. I could hear it through the floor like a conversation being played on the wrong frequency. Eleanor's voice demanding to know how he could say something like that about his own kid. His voice underneath it, lower, defensive, saying it was just a stupid joke. Just 2 men talking. He didn't even remember saying it that way. Her voice back over his, telling him he conveniently forgot the exact moment that broke his child. A door slammed, then nothing. I didn't sleep. The next morning, Eleanor knocked early. She was holding my old composition notebook, a cheap thing, black cover, from when I was 14. She said she'd found it going through boxes in my closet. Said she'd only opened to one page, the one with the corner folded down. She set it on the bed in front of me. I recognized the handwriting. 14 and pressing too hard with the pen, like the anger needed somewhere to go. I'd written down every word I'd heard in that parking lot. Word for word. Every single word. And at the bottom, I'd written, if he doesn't want me as a son, I won't act like one. Her tears were already on the page by the time I looked up. She asked why I'd never told her. I said I knew what she would have done. Told me he didn't mean it. Told me I needed to let it go. Told me he loved me deep down and that was what mattered. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said she probably would have said exactly that. She admitted it straight out. Said she would have been wrong to say it. Arthur tried to come to my room twice that day. The first time I didn't answer. The second time I heard him through the door, not performing anything. Not with the energy of someone trying to win something. Just quiet and tired and running out of ways to hold himself together. He said what he said that day was the worst thing he'd ever done. That he'd used me as a punchline to bond with a stranger and he'd carry that until he was in the ground. He said he never meant those things. He said he knew he couldn't take them back. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall and listened to the whole thing through the door. I didn't open it, but I stayed. 2 days before I left, Eleanor sat on the edge of my bed and asked me one more time to talk to him. Not forgive him, not pretend everything was fine, just listen for 5 minutes. I thought about it, then I said, fine. He came in and sat across from me. He looked smaller than I remembered. Dark circles, drawn face, like the last few days had used something up in him that wasn't coming back. He said he'd been trying to figure out how to start this for 2 days and still didn't know. I told him to just say it. He told me he'd laughed that day because he was performing for another dad, trying to seem like he had everything handled, like he was the kind of guy who had it all figured out. He said Michael was loud and easy and obvious to be proud of out loud. I was quieter, harder to read, and instead of doing the actual work of understanding that, he'd made it into a bit for a stranger. He said he was ashamed of it. Had been for a long time. I asked him why he'd lied when Eleanor asked him directly. He said the second Michael mentioned the tournament, he knew. He'd actually known for a while, not the exact words, but that something had happened that day, that it was tied to when everything changed. He'd told himself he was misremembering, that it was too long ago to be sure of. He was terrified to confirm it because confirming it meant admitting out loud that 4 years of silence had been a direct response to something he'd actually said. I told him that was the thing that sat worst with me, not just hearing it, but knowing that he probably suspected and still chose to say nothing and let me carry it by myself. He didn't fight that. I asked him why he laughed. He stopped. I watched him search for something, some framing that would make it better, some angle that would soften it, and come up completely empty. He finally said I was right. The laugh was the part he couldn't explain. He could tell me it came from insecurity and performing for an audience. And all of that was true. But none of it changed the fact that he'd laughed like it was one of the better jokes he'd heard that summer. He asked if he could hug me. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. He crossed the room and put his arms around me, and something that had been wound tight for 4 years just quietly let go. Not dramatically, more like a fist unclenching after it finally gets too tired to stay closed. I stood there and let it happen. And then I was crying. Not for the situation in front of me, but for the 14-year-old version of me behind that truck who decided that being invisible was safer than being someone's punchline again. That kid had done a lot of damage getting here. But he'd also survived it. When we stepped apart, I told him this didn't mean everything was fine. He said he knew. He wasn't expecting it to be. I said I'd try not to hate him. He said that was more than he deserved. He left without another word. That night, the 4 of us ate dinner together. No forced smiles, no performance of a happy family. Just 4 people at a table with food in front of them. Still heavy, but not suffocating. Michael looked between us partway through and asked if we were okay. I said, not okay, but better. Arthur nodded, said it was a start. That was enough to eat dinner on. 2 days later, I left. Eleanor held on at the door like she was trying to keep the moment from moving. Michael drove me to the airport and kept things light the whole ride, which was exactly right. Arthur hugged me before I got in the car, brief, steady, not making a production of it. He whispered that he was going to do better, that I didn't have to believe him. He just needed me to watch. I told him not to make a promise, just do it. He nodded. Before I walked into the terminal, I turned back and said, "Goodbye, Dad." First time I'd used that word in 4 years. He froze for half a second. Then something in his face just opened up and he said, "Goodbye, son." His voice barely holding. I didn't look back after that. 5 years later, I was standing at my bathroom mirror adjusting my tie the morning of my master's graduation when my phone buzzed. Michael texting that they were on the road, that Eleanor had already cried twice since breakfast, that Arthur had pulled over once so she could collect herself. I smiled and kept getting ready. The first year I was away, Arthur called every Sunday. It was awkward at the start, the kind of conversation where you can feel both people trying in real time. Lots of pauses, topics that didn't go anywhere. But he never missed it. Not once. By the second year, the calls got real. He started talking about what he was working through. The years he'd spent writing Michael's success because it was easy. The way he'd kept me at arm's length because I reminded him of himself when he was young and uncertain and afraid of not being enough. He'd punished me for the thing he recognized in himself instead of protecting it. He actually said that, word for word. That was the first time something between us genuinely shifted. The third year he visited alone. We spent a weekend together, watched a soccer game, ate cheap diner food, talked until past midnight. At one point, he asked if I remembered all the times I'd asked him to come to my games when I was young. I said I did. He said every time he'd said no, he told himself it didn't matter, that there would be other games. I told him there was a difference between too late and just late. Too late means you missed your chance. Late means you still have one. He looked up when I said that. Something in his face settled. Fourth year I went home for Christmas. First time the four of us at the same table, same setup, completely different air. He spent the whole night asking about my projects, my research, what I was thinking about doing next. He listened the whole way through. Actually listened. After dinner, he pulled me aside and handed me a small box. Inside was an old watch, scratched, well-worn. Somebody's before it was mine. His father's. He said he'd been given it at his own college graduation and had always assumed it would go to Michael. I asked why it wasn't going to Michael. He said Michael had plenty. All the games, all the trophies, all the years he'd actually shown up for. I had almost none of that. He said this wasn't an exchange and he knew it didn't undo anything. He just wanted me to have something that was mine. I told him it didn't erase what happened. He said he knew. He said maybe it would just remind me that he never stopped loving me, even during the years when he had no idea how to show it. I put it on that night. I never took it off. I was wearing it at graduation. When they called my name and I walked across that stage, I looked up into the stands. Eleanor was crying. Michael had his phone out filming. Arthur was on his feet all the way up, standing, clapping with both hands, tears going down his face, not caring who saw. I thought about the 14-year-old kid behind that truck. The one who decided that being invisible was the only way to survive what he'd heard. That kid had built walls that held for 4 solid years. He'd also done real damage on the way out, but he'd survived it. And then he'd done the harder thing. He'd given someone the space to try. That's not nothing. After the ceremony, the 4 of us got pizza. Nothing fancy. Eleanor asked what was next, what offers I had on the table. I told her I had 3. 1 nearby, 1 in New York, 1 back home. Arthur looked up when I said back home. I met his eyes and told him I was considering it. He didn't say a word, just smiled. Not a performance. Not the forced kind from years ago, just a quiet, real smile. Small and completely genuine. That night after they left for their hotel, I stood at my apartment window and looked out at the city. My phone buzzed. A text from Arthur, "Thank you for letting us be part of today. It means more than I can say. I love you." I typed back 3 words. I love you, too. And for the first time in a long time, I meant every single one. So, here's my question for you. Do you think Daniel forgave too easily, or was giving his dad that second chance the right move?